is non-roster invites to big league camp in spring training. Dodgers announced 20 players are going to be in big league camp with them. And this, of course, the non-roster invites are not on their 40-man roster, but they get a chance to be in big league camp, kind of the major league clubhouse side of Camelback Ranch. The group is, it's like per usual, it's a blend of some prospects, veterans with MLB experience, and other players who are probably just going to be, mainly organizational depth throughout the minor league level, primarily AAA Oklahoma City. And I think, for me here, the headliners are obviously Daniel Hudson, who everybody's certainly familiar with. On the prospect side, you have Dalton Rushing and River Ryan are going to be in big league camp with the Dodgers this year. So I think that'll be exciting. Daniel, is there anyone else that kind of sticks out to you?
I mean, the first guys are the guys you just named. Obviously, Daniel Hudson is the headliner here. Like, what is he going to look like in spring training? Can he work his way on to the big league roster? We know he's had his fair share of injury, issues the past couple of years. He's getting up there in age, but we also know when he's been healthy, he has typically pitched really well for the Dodgers. So he's kind of someone to keep an eye on in spring training, see, where his health is at, where his velo's at and such. And like you mentioned, they do have a couple guys with major league, experience in there. Jesse Hahn, Eliezer Hernandez, two guys who haven't pitched in the big leagues in a couple years, but the Dodgers obviously saw something there to bring them in. And these are mainly just like depth type pieces. Like we've seen with the Dodgers time and time again throughout the course of the regular season, pitchers are going to get hurt. They're going to need guys that they could call up to make a spot start or whatever the case may be. So, anytime, the Dodgers kind of identify someone with, major league experience, you think, what tweaks can they make? So going to, be keeping an eye on those guys. And also, like you mentioned, the top prospects, Dalton Rushing, River Ryan are the headliners there kind of. Obviously, those guys aren't, competing for an opening day roster spot necessarily, but it's always fun to get out to spring training and see those guys typically, in the back half of games, getting that bat or two or an inning or two on the mound and just kind of see where their progress is at. So, yeah, there's, I'm not saying any of these guys are going to be huge, contributors necessarily this season, but it will be fun to track them in spring training and see if who could end up being that guy down the road who pops onto the roster and ends up doing well or whatever.
Yeah, and I think let's kind of zero in a little bit on Daniel Hudson, just because I think his name is somebody we're going to have to sort of keep in mind as we kind of go along in our show tonight and move on to different one key topic, but specifically. I think I don't want to necessarily speak for you. I was a little surprised that the Dodgers didn't. I'd have to go back. I forgot what the number was on Hudson. They had a team option on him, I think, right? Or was he just a straight? Okay, so I was a little surprised that they declined it at the time, just because I thought that it was Hudson and the Dodgers were kind of a good fit together. Like the Dodgers, they have the bullpen depth to sort of, if he needs a little bit of time early on in the season, to recover from his latest knee injury, then it would be fine. Then to see that they re-signed him didn't surprise me. And I think that it was a minor league deal. Like that shocked me a little bit, but also it's kind of the best of both worlds for the Dodgers because there's basically no pressure on Daniel Hudson. Like you said, spring training, like he can use the entire spring, just basically making sure he's healthy and then go to AAA Oklahoma City, pitch that first month and find your footing, that way. That being said, what would you think are sort of reasonable expectations for Hudson in the spring?
Yeah, I think you got to temper expectations just because of the injury history and his age. Obviously, like he's not in his prime and he's coming back from now back-to-back years with, significant knee injuries. So I'm kind of going in with no expectations. And I think that's why the minor league deal kind of fits perfectly. Cause like if he goes out in spring training and shows he's healthy and his stuff looks good, you could easily add him to the roster if you want. And if not, like you just said, you could give him as much time as he needs. Like he could go down to AAA and work on some stuff, get back to fully, 100%. So he is kind of the one name on the list that sticks out just because you don't really think someone with his, resume as a minor league deal type of guy. But it is kind of similar to Jason Hayward last year in a sense that it's kind of like if he's healthy and could prove that he could still perform, he's going to be added to the roster eventually. Like he's not just going to be stashed at AAA all season, but he does coming off the last couple seasons he's had, he does need to show, that he is healthy and still has this stuff. So I like that deal for both sides, and I'm hoping for the best, because when he was healthy, he was like a legit, back end of the bullpen type guy, even like a closer type. So if the Dodgers were able to get that out of him, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and I think and I am assuming here, but I think it's a safe assumption is the Dodgers and Daniel Hudson basically have discussed or did discuss kind of a plan to, hey, okay, we'll bring you back on a minor league deal. This is kind of what we're thinking, sort of mapping out the season. Because typically, especially for veteran players like Hudson, minor league contracts do have opt-out clauses. And hey, maybe his will come up at some point. And if he's still in AAA and the Dodgers bullpen is sort of loaded, like maybe there's not necessarily room and he just ends up moving on at that point. But I would be shocked, just because, like I said, I think over the past couple of years, and the Dodgers have this reputation of with other players too, of like working well with them and sort of being, I think, upfront as to what they're planning and thinking. Another name that we both agreed is kind of sticking out is Dalton Rushing, and I think his, to me, is obviously on the other end of the spectrum, just because he's a young prospect still sort of making his way up through the farm system. But if you've kept up with our website, we've published different prospect rankings that have been released by Baseball America, MLB Pipeline, Baseball Prospectus, and the sort. And Dalton Rushing has basically overtaken Diego Cartaya in terms of prospect pedigree. And so, the Dodgers, just a year ago, maybe not necessarily last year, because Cartaya's slide sort of began, but 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he was the catcher of the future. And now, I don't know, like if you asked me, to basically play, you know me well, I'm not a betting man at all, but if you've twisted my arm hard enough and I needed to, I would probably bet on Dalton Rushing making more of an impact with the Dodgers at this point, just because of what we've sort of seen with Diego Cartaya. And that's not to say he won't necessarily have a successful career of his own, but I'm not necessarily sure it's going to end up coming with the Dodgers.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the Dodgers have Will Smith right now, so like there's the opportunities are already limited at catcher. But when you look, he only has 2 years of club control left, and then who knows beyond that. Obviously, we would love for them to sign him to a long-term extension, but as we've seen with some other guys, it doesn't always work out that way. So to be able to have this discussion is even a huge luxury. Like the fact that the Dodgers have 2 quality catching prospects coming up. I'm in agreement with you, though. It seems like Rushing has kind of taken that leap above Cartaya. He's pretty much, ever since the Dodgers drafted him, he's just come in and hit at every single level. So that's kind of why I'm excited to see him in spring training. Maybe take some at bats off actual big league pitchers, see how he does there. And also as a catcher, obviously there's a lot to learn. Like you got to learn all the pitchers on the staff, like and such. So just him being around all those guys will bode well for the future, even if we're probably not going to see him at all this season, unless there's a few injuries and he just, continues raking. But it'll be a good experience for him just to be in big league camp for a few weeks and learn as much as possible from the Will Smiths, from Austin Barnes, and some of the veteran pitchers on that staff.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that Dalton Rushing was drafted out of Louisville, which of course is where Will Smith is from. And I think as a baseball program in general, Louisville produces good talent, but it seems to be holding especially true at the catcher position.
Yeah.